Psychometric properties of physical self-instruments in different cultures. Recently, the greatest step forward in physical self-research has been facilitated by the development of multidimensional and hierarchical physical self-instruments of the Physical Self-Perception Profile, PSPP, Fox and Corbin 89, and Physical Self-Description Questionnaire, PSDQ, Marsh et al. 94. These two instruments were originally validated in the English-speaking populations and Western cultures with a strong emphasis on individualism. Fox and Corbin 89, Marsh et al. 94, Hein et al. 90 argued that much of what we apparently know about the self-concept is based substantially on a North American perspective that cannot be assumed to generalize other social and cultural settings. In physical self-research and sports science more specifically, much support for the psychological instruments and theoretical models have been based largely on the responses of students in English-speaking countries. Although there has been some research in other countries, it is important to evaluate rigorously the responses of instruments that have become carefully translated to test the theoretical predictions in cross-cultural settings. Translation of instruments into other languages offers the opportunity to study the construct validity of the questionnaire in different cultures and assess the generalizability of its factor structure. However, it is well known amongst test developers that the use of the test in a culture other than that of which was developed requires evidence on the test reliability, validity, and other new settings. Nowadays, there is an increasing attempt to test psychometric properties on the physical self-instruments in non-English speaking nations and cultures other than those developed in Western European nations. For example, SCSC and Zorba 99 investigated the psychometric properties of the PSPP and provided support for the validity and reliability, specifically among the Turkish university students. The four-factor structure of the PSPP was supported by and obtained by reliability evidence was accepted. Zero order and partial correlation analysis was also supported in the hierarchical structure of the Turkish version of the PSPP. Zero order and partial correlation analysis also supported the hierarchical structure of the Turkish version of the PSPP. In addition, the PSPP was validated with college students in the United Kingdom, Page, Ashford, Fox, and Brittle 93, and amongst Flemish students, Van de Vliet et al. 02, the PSPP has been found to have good cross-sectional cultural validity in a number of other countries, including Canada, Crocker, Eklund, Kowalski, Spain, Atienza, Balaguer, and Ferreno, and Fox 04, and Portugal, Ferrara, Fox 03. The predictive validity of the PSPP was also tested in different countries. For example, Fox and Corbin 89 assessed the predictive validity of the subscale in the PSPP through their relationship with both the degree and type of physical activity involvement among the American university students. The analysis indicated that the four PSPP subscale scores differentiated between active and non-active American university students. Percent correctly classified that for females was 70.7 and for males 70.4 for both American females and males. The physical condition scores were the most important determinant of physical activity participation. Page et al. 93. Evaluated the predictive validity of the PSPP for British university students and reported that the four PSPP subdomains could correctly classify 74.1 of the subjects and a low of 83.3 as high in physical activity similar to American university students. The physical condition scores were the dominant variable in the physical activity prediction. Recently, SC, Kegler, and Karaka 3 tested the predictive validity of a Turkish version of the PSPP on 879 university students. The discriminant analysis using the four PSPP subscores to differentiate between the active and non-active Turkish university students indicated the PSPP could correctly classify 59% of males and 61% of 0.3 of females. The physical condition variable for males and sports competence variables for females were the most important in their respective disciplines and functions. Besides studies on the psychometric properties of PSPP, some researchers have examined the psychometric properties of the PSDQ for different cultures. For instance, SC conducted a study on the psychometric properties of the PSDQ in the Turkish culture and reported that PSDQ is a psychometric and sound instrument for measuring physical self of Turkish university students. In addition, Nig, Norman, Rossi, and Benesovic 1 tested the internal validity of the PSDQ factor structure in a North American sample of young adults and examined multidimensional hierarchical structure of physical self. CFA results provided clear support for the 11 theoretical constructs of the PSDQ for American university students. Klomsten also validated the PSDQ among Norwegian populations, and the results supported the priori structure of the PSDQ. Klomsten, Slavik, and Esnes, 4. Still, Marsh, Richards, and Offerman, 3. Used the construct validation approach to test the psychometric properties of the PSDQ for elderly Australians, and sound psychometric properties were found. Recently, Still and Offerman, 5. tested the German version of the PSDQ for adolescents and young adults, 16 through 28 years old, and found support for 11 components of the German version of the PSDQ. The Children and Youth Physical Self-Perception Profile, CYPSPP, is another physical self-instrument for assessing perceptions of children in the psychometric domain. Whitehead, 95, published a version of the PSPP and was modified for children and youth, the CYPSPP. The modification was developed with the assumption that because of self-esteem is becoming differentiated in childhood and adolescence, the CYPSPP content would be the same as for college students, PSPP, but would perhaps be less factorially distinct in subdomains. However, the same four-factor structure and hierarchical model was supported, and further evidence of construct validity was found. Similar results were reported. Results were reported by Welk, Corbin, and Lewis, 95, using the CYPSPP with a sample of athletes. Subsequently, Eklund, Whitehead, and Welk, 97, examined the factorial validity, the hierarchical global to specific domain structure of the CYPSPP using confirmatory factors analysis, CFA, and supported the initial evidence of reliability and validity, published by Whitehead, 95. An exploratory study by Welk, Corbin, Dowell, and Harris, 97, and a recent confirmatory study by Welk and Eklund, 5, supported the utility of the CYPSPP model on elementary school students. Like the PSPP and PSDQ, the psychometric properties of the CYPSPP have been tested in different cultures. For example, Assey, Eklund, Whiteland, Karatzi, and Koka, 5, recently reported evidence supporting the factorial validity and reliability of the CYPSPP for Turkish children and youth. Furthermore, Rostorp, Stahl, Gudesic, and Kinnunen and Madison, 5, validated the Swedish translation of the CYPSPP and reported good concurrent and content validity retest reliability. In summary, these studies have provided strong support for the utility of physical self-instruments in various cultural settings. Specifically, the findings revealed accepted psychometric properties of physical self-instruments in non-English speaking nations and cultures other than those in the developed Western European nations. In the literature, however, it is possible to find studies that have used different methodology approaches for testing the validity of physical self-instruments in different cultures. In the following sections, these studies will be briefly summarized under the subheadings multi-trait, multi-method analysis relations of physical self-instruments with external criteria and known group differences. Multi-trait, multi-method, MTMM comparisons of physical self-instruments. Reviewers of self-concept measurement, e.g. Marsh, 90, Savrelson et al., 76, Wiley, 74, 79, emphasized the central role in the MTMM in full first-time analysis in the constructive validation of self-concept responses. In this approach, multidimensional concepts instruments purporting the measure of the same or subsequently overlapping scales are administered to the same group of respondents. The approach consists of systematic evaluation and correlations between the scales from different instruments that are posited to be matching the same or similar content, and non-matching. In this approach, convergent validity is supported by large correlations between matching scales and different instruments. The discriminant validity is supported when convergent validities are larger than other correlations. The first MTMM study of multidimensional physical self instruments was conducted by Marsh et al. 94. In this study, students completed 3 physical self concept instruments, the PSDQ, PSPP, and Richards Physical Self Concept PSC scale. Based on the evaluation of the content to these 11 PSDQ, 7 PSC, and 5 PSPP scales, Marsh and his colleagues predicted which scales from different instruments would be most highly correlated. Correlations, convergent validities. Among scales from the 3 instruments predicted to be matching were systematically larger than those among non-matching scales. The PSDQ, convergent validities, were higher than those involved in the other 2 instruments. These results supported the convergent and discriminant validity of the PSDQ responses for Australian high school students. Another MTMM analysis study was conducted on the responses of Turkish University students to the PSDQ and PSPP. Marsh, SC, and Thomas (2), Marsh et al. 2, compared the content of items from 16 scales, 11 PSDQ, 5 PSPP, and predicted which scales from different instruments were the most correlated. Based on this, 55 correlations relating to 11 PSDQ and 5 PSPP scales were classified into 3 categories. A. Convergent 3 convergent validities in which scales were most closely matched. B. 4 convergent validities in which scales were ambiguously or less closely matched. And C. Non-matching correlations. Heterotrait, heteromethod. Strength, sport, competence, and global physical self-worth scales of the PSPP were most logically related to the PSDQ. Strength, sport, competence, and general physical self-concept scales. All 3 of these convergent validities were very large and larger than correlations with other PSDQ factors: strength 0.84, sport 0.86, and general physical self-worth 0.76. The other 4 convergent validities, PSPP body with PSDQ physical self-appearance 0.69, PSPP conditioned with PSDQ endurance 0.76, and PSDQ physical self-activity 0.65, were subsequently substantial, with the possible exception of 0.34 between PSDQ body fat and PSPP body attractiveness. These expected convergent validities were systematically higher than those among non-matching scales. This provides good support for convergent and divergent validities of the PSDQ among Turkish university students. Recently, MTMM evaluated the 3 physical self measures was conducted by Richards, Marsh, Bar, Ali, and Zach at 5. When compared MTMM responses of 2 samples of Israeli university students with Australian high school students on 3 physical self instruments, consistent with previous MTMM studies, Marsh et al. 94 and in '02, content of items from scales of 3 instruments were compared to predict which scales from different instruments would be most closely correlated. The results supported the predictions that convergent validities were consistently large and larger correlations among non-matching factors. In summary, these 3 MTMM studies provide evidence for the utility of using physical self-instruments in Australian, Turkish, and Israeli cultures. The MTMM analysis supported both the convergent and discriminant validity of the PSDQ and, to a lesser extent, the PSPP in different cultural settings.